Welcome, Kellogg community. I'm Michaela Doyle with the Kellogg School of Management. Thank you for joining us today for our conversations with Kellogg Leaders featuring Guilherme Gerdau Johannpeter. In this webinar series, Dean Corneli speaks with Kellogg alumni leaders on timely issues and challenges facing the global business community. You can catch up on prior webinars in this series at our virtual events page on the Kellogg alumni website. We will put a link to that site into the chat now. Today's presentation will last 1 hour, and we invite you to submit questions for our speaker at any time using the Q&A icon that's located at the bottom of your screen. We will address audience questions throughout the conversation, and with that, I'm happy to welcome Dean Francesca Corneli.
Hello, everyone. I'm so glad we are all together again talking about another amazing Kellogg leader. This is such a privilege, and it's my pleasure today to welcome Guilherme Gerdau Johannpeter, who is an amazing Kellogg alum, who is really leading, is a fifth generation leader of Gerdau, who is a giant in the steel industry. And I have to tell you, as soon as we announced it, I got an email from another alum commending me for inviting to talk as such a leader in the steel industry. And I said, of course, this is Kellogg. This is the kind of people we have. But also I have to say, Guilherme and his wife, Andrea, have been such a great presence also in the Kellogg community. When they were on campus, they seem to have been the center of the Brazilian community, but in general, of all the Kellogg alums at the time, they always share fond memories. Their son is a student right now. Their daughter is coming. They are a very purple family, and I'm so delighted to interview him. Guilherme, thank you for coming today.
My pleasure, Francesca. An honor to be here chatting with you in this virtual, but hopefully very present and warm talk. Thank you.
Yes, so that's what exactly the Zoom allows us to do, to reach out alumni around the world. Now, let's start talking about Gerdau, right? Because it started in Brazil 120 years ago, and it's quite unique versus things that we see in the US, for example, because it still remains a closely held family business. So can you give us a little bit of a background of how Gerdau grew to become one of the world? So it's not only Brazil, it's a giant. Brazil is a giant in the world, one of the world's largest supplier of long steel and specialty steel.
Yes. Well, we just celebrated 124 years last week, and we started, Francesca, very small with a nail shop, a nail factory in the south of Brazil. And if you take a quick step back, my fifth generations back, my great-grandfather came from Germany and migrated to the south of Brazil. And at the time, he wanted to come in and work his brother actually went to New York, but he couldn't find a spot in the ship to go to New York. So they sent him to South America at the time, that they needed immigrants from Italy and Germany mostly. So he came and wanted to work in the port of Rio Grande in the south of Brazil, but the port was bankrupt when he arrived. So he went to the agribusiness and started planting rice. So he quickly was successful in that business of in agricultural business, and made money, went back to Germany, got married, and he liked Brazil so much that he came back to Brazil. So Brazil, back to Germany, and then back to Brazil in a matter of 20 years or so. And he bought a nail shop, okay, and a furniture business and stocks from a beer company. I play every time that we got the short end of the stick, but because beer is always a better business than steel. But he got, which later became Brahma. So so he got into the nail shop business. And then fast forward, my grandfather, okay, who was also coming here in Brazil, in a process of doing inspections for Deutsche Bank. So he was a Deutsche Bank inspector. He met my grandmother, and the nail shop was part of my grandmother side of the family. So he met my grandmother, and he didn't know anything about steel or nails or metallurgical products. He didn't know anything about it, but he was an accountant from Deutsche Bank. So they had 4 kids, and they grew up in a very strict German type culture that went through our company, permeated into which is has been the culture of our company ever since, doing the right thing, always playing with ethics at the highest level. And so he came into this business and decided, okay, if I'm not going back to Europe, I might as well join the nail shop business. So he got in, started developing. He didn't want to depend on importing wire from Germany. So he got into the steel business, the back integrating, and then supplying steel to the nail shop. And then fast forward 40 years, they got into steel. And then slowly we grew our business. And then in in the mid 90s, the privatization process came, and we grew our business through the privatization process in Brazil. So the government quickly got to the conclusion that steel was not the right capital allocation from the government standpoint. They were running deficits. The mills were not productive. They were losing a lot of money. So they decided to privatize the steel sector in Brazil. And that's where we grew our business significantly through the privatization process. And then we were successful. And then through the privatization process, and we decided, all right, we're going to stick to steel. This is what we do. This is what we like. This is what we understand. So we focused our attention and our efforts in the steel business. If you look at other Latin American groups and companies, they tend to be more diversified. They go into services. They go into infrastructure type work. They go maybe telecom and other things. But we decided to stick to steel. To a point that we had so much market share in the Brazilian market that our version of the DOJ here said, you cannot buy anything else. So that's when we decided to go outside and we started into Uruguay and then Canada. And then in the early 2000s, we bought our footprint, started to build our footprint in the US. If you take today, the US market, US, Canada, and Mexico is more than half of our business. But we were almost like forced out of Brazil because of the concentration that we had, market share concentration that we had. And we saw an opportunity in business there as well. So we started building that footprint in the US as an opportunity, because some of our competitors back then did not like the assets that were for sale in the US, mainly because they were unionized assets that needed additional capital, significant capital, I would say. So that presented as an opportunity for us to grow our business outside Brazil.
That's an amazing story of like slowly getting to the giant you are. But so also, you know, it's a story also of a family that kept investing. So one thing I was thinking is, you know, we have at Kellogg the World Center, which is a center on family enterprises, which is really trying to look at what is different about management of family businesses. So for you, being a 5th generation leader of Gerdau, what is special about managing a family business versus another business?
Yeah, it's It's a good question, Francesco. We ask that question very, very often ourselves, and I had the privilege to talk to John Ward back in 1999. I think that's when he started teaching, and that's when I was there, and so I was probably one of the first classes of the John Ward Center for Family Enterprises. I told you that story before, and well, when we look at what are the characteristics of a family business is we first we look and we say, all right, when we look at results, financial results, and so I think it's very personal to us because first, if things don't go well, we don't have anywhere else to go, right? And so results become very personal. Okay, and when things go well, we see the family very much together. We see the family thriving, relationships become even stronger. But when things don't go very well, that's when you need the rules of engagement. You need the governance in place to protect the business and also to protect the family. Okay, it's very, in our case, we are fifth generation. We are 15 cousins. Okay, and we have 3 members that are currently working in the family business. It's myself, and I have 2 older cousins that work directly with me. Okay, we work together. We've been working together all our lives. Just like our parents. So there's some level of complement. The skills are complementary. Okay, I have a cousin that is very much an engineering mind. He works on the operations and plants and capex. I have another cousin that is more on governance, HR, strategy, and myself. I always been dedicated my career in the U.S. and in Brazil to more commercial, sales, and marketing, and then understanding the markets where we're going to supply and play. So we've been, part of our success has been this being able to complement the family and the individuals, complement their skill sets within ourselves. And another, I'll say probably another key topic of a family business that we always discuss is that we tend to have a longer term vision on things. Okay, and that's always because things change, and it's very difficult sometimes because things change so rapidly, and the changes are so intense that what we say today, what we plan today, is probably not valid for tomorrow. But at the same time, we want to make sure we sustain this. Okay, we're stewards of a business, and it becomes very personal to us. So when we look at this, it's on a more of a longer term vision, and on taking results very personally, and also making sure the family that is involved in the business complement itself as a team, work as a team together with all the professional management that we have, but also cater and work very closely with the individuals that are from the family but are not in the business. Those sometimes are as important as the ones that are inside the business, because when things don't go well, they need to understand why they're not going well. So information flow in a family business is very important. The rules are important. The governance when the governance is built right, when it's built correctly, it plays to our favor in a big way. And John, I used to talk a lot with John Ward about this, and about the building the rules, the protocols, to keep the family informed as well as engaged in a successful business.
In one sense, you're making it sound easy, but it's not. I know, because when I'm involved here with the World Center, I hear so many families struggle to go beyond the 3rd generation, and you're already a 5th generation and thriving. So clearly, all these details, it takes a lot of thought. I'm sure you all put a lot of thought into it.
Yeah. So and also we want to make sure we really have to ask, we have to ask the question, do we want to have a group of individuals that understand the business, that take care of the business, develop the business, grow the business, and are part of a family, or a part of a dream for the company? Okay, and if the answer is no, it's okay. It's going to quickly become, a family can quickly become diluted, and it quickly becomes a corporation. All right, but if the answer, and which is fine, that's
Yes.
been the trajectory, a lot of the majority of some of these large companies. But if the answer is yes, we want to continue to invest. Yes, we want to continue to control the business. In our case, we have the control of the voting stock of the business. Okay. If the answer is yes, well, you need to put the right governance in place. You need to develop individuals further, and it takes a lot of time. It doesn't happen in 1 or 2 years. In our case, it took decades, and because it's a maturity process, it's a developmental process that takes decades. In our case, it took a lot of time. But at the same time, we worked with one generation together with the other, and that's kind of tricky sometimes. We got to a point, relative specifically to our case, we got to a point that we couldn't have 2 generations working. We needed to get rid, okay, of the previous generation, so that we could modernize our culture. We could make the investments we thought we wanted to make, get out of markets that we thought were not profitable. We couldn't make a difference. We were not generating returns above the cost of capital in a lot of these markets. And we could only make those decisions if we had our own generation on top of things, controlling, making decisions, and taking responsibility to those decisions. So that's part of the evolution of the process. And one other key aspect of the family business is that there's really no answer that one size fits all. Every family has its dynamics, its speed in which it makes those types of changes and evolutions. So there's really no one time fits all, but there are frameworks that are important. But when you get to the details and specific of each family, it varies according to each of the families, you know. And I think one other topic that we changed recently, Francesca, it's probably relevant to say, is that we put rules and that were very difficult for other generational members come, like the 6th generation, for instance. They had to have experience outside and so on and so forth. So recently we removed those barriers, and we have additional members learning the business. And if the culture of the company is so strong that we believe if those individuals, for some reason, perform, they're going to grow, continue growing, developing, and so on. But if they don't, I think the system is going to move them away, remove them. Okay. And also we play in these new rules with additional consultants and evaluators that are not part of the family. So I don't evaluate a nephew, for instance, or the son of one of my cousins and sons and so on. So we don't evaluate them directly. So we try to stay away from making those decisions directly on evaluating people. So we build a committee around it to follow through their careers and their development.
Actually, that's a great question. I had a question here. This is yours. This is a great answer from an alum from Italy who's a 4th generation family business, and was asking, how do you prepare or select the 6th generation? And what you're talking is so thoughtful about also taking a step back. But I also then, unless you have something to add, I want to combine another question with something I wanted to ask you. So there is a question here. It said, you mentioned having German values that is part of the organization culture. Can you talk more about that? And I also wanted, going about your values, is you've been expanding internationally, right? And I think that could be the challenge. You stick to your value, but you arrive to different countries which have different cultures. How do you operationalize your values in different countries?
Yes. Um, when we looked at some of this at our international expansion, okay, that happened in the 90s and more late 90s, early 2000s, okay. We were coming in, and some of our competitors and some on those markets said, "What are these Brazilians doing here? Okay, are they really a threat? Are they gonna be taken seriously, or are they just being adventurous in some of these markets?" Okay, and quickly, how we needed to gain the credibility within the workforce of these factories, right? Of the footprint of the manufacturing units, and some of these factories were union based, so we needed to get the credibility of the union. And how did we do that? Well, we told them that our number one value is safety. Okay, and remember, Francesca, we do 1 million tons a month, okay, of steel. So 1 million tons, okay, what is 1 million tons? So 1 million tons, take the Eiffel Tower. The Eiffel Tower is, the Eiffel Tower is approximately 10,000 tons. So we make 100 Eiffel Towers per month.
That's a good way.
Yeah, it's a good way of explaining the volume of metal, of steel, that goes into these types of operations. So it's 12 million tons a year, and it's 1 million tons a month, 100 Eiffel Towers. So it's high temperature, okay, a lot of mobile equipment inside the plants, huge maintenance jobs, okay, that occur in multiple times. Some of them you're probably doing a furnace, and then you're working on the rolling mill, and we need to follow procedures. And when we came to these shops, we had fatalities all over the place. We had accidents that were quite severe, fairly regularly. And we came and we said, nothing is more important than safety for a lot of these individuals, and nothing is more important than safety for Gerdau. And we want you to go back home just as you came in. So we put a lot of effort. So we gained credibility, and the culture started moving our way. Okay, once we gained their commitment and their passion to follow what we wanted to do. So safety played a big role. We strive to do the right thing. Okay, so we do things right, and that came and did the right thing. We are here for the long term, so that played to our advantage. And we came in some of these assets that required a lot of capital, and we had capital to invest. So we not only modernized these plants, but we gave opportunity to a lot of these people, a lot of these individuals that were in the US or Mexico and Canada or in Argentina, Peru, Uruguay, and so the countries that we're currently operating. But also we gave opportunity to young, talented Brazilian engineers that only joined Gerdau because they had the opportunity to move and work in the US or to work in Canada and so on. So we did this arbitrage of people, of young, talented engineers that we could recruit in Brazil, and then prepare them and send them to the US to work at the steel plants in the US. So that played a big role to our favor. But at the same time, I'll probably like to mention, Francesca, one thing that I learned from a senior member from McKinsey. Yes. He said, well, listen, if you are going to go to the US market, pay attention. When you're coming to the US market, expanding your operations to the US market, and a local player didn't do very well, be careful, because the US market is the deepest capital market. It has the best talent pool, and it's the most sophisticated market. If the local player didn't work, watch out if you're coming in. So we had to watch out, but luckily it played to our advantage.
So that's very interesting, because I see a lot of question here about the steel industry, and I want to talk to you about. Let me take a couple of questions from here. One is someone who says hello to you, Ramon Sampaio, and he says, given the inherent volatility in commodity markets, what are the key strategies the company employs to manage price fluctuation and mitigate the financial impact of market swings? And do you believe being a family business helps to manage this fluctuation with more focus on long-term results?
Yeah, well, I think it's a good question from Ramon. And what we're trying to do and what we learned as well, especially coming out of the pandemic and coming out of even before the pandemic, the big crisis we had here in Brazil in 2014 and 15 and 16, three very bad years here. And in the US as well, we were being flooded by Chinese imports, and we can talk about imports as well, is that as the markets evolve, the main huge super cycle of commodities driven by China is gone. It's not going to happen again. So the main infrastructure put in place in China in the last 30 years, it's not going to happen in the same way in the next 30 years. So the huge infrastructure that was built in China as a priority from the main party in China, this drove a lot of infrastructure work. The market in China now is close to a billion tons. Okay, the infrastructure work is tremendous. It's not going to happen again. It's in place. The infrastructure in China is in place. So what's happening is adding to this volatility is China is reducing its production, its steel production, and exporting close to 10%, between 10 and 15% of its output. But that's a huge volume of steel. And then comes and generates this incredible volatility in prices around the world, given the excess capacity that was put in place in China with a lot of subsidies by the government. It's an important point, because we wanted to come into China early on and build capacity in China. But foreigners were never welcome. It was actually forbidden because it was a strategic sector in China. So we were never able to produce steel in China. But at the same time, we saw provinces in China flooding the markets and investing a lot of money, state-owned, investing significant amounts of capital in state-owned enterprises that now have this tremendous amount of excess capacity generating pricing fluctuations. How we dealt with that is that, okay, we're going to focus our attention in the Americas. We will be relevant in the US. We will be relevant in North America and in South America. So we decided to get out of India. We decided to get out of Europe and focus our attention basically in the Americas. So, and one other topic that to face this incredible volatility of prices that we have today is that we decided we are not going to run a levered company anymore. Our balance sheet is going to be a cast iron balance sheet. We're going to run very low levels of debt, because once EBITDA, once cash generation drops, it doesn't really drop, it collapses. So the pricing fluctuations and volume fluctuations to the similar extent. It's tremendous. So we decided to run a business with very low debt, only and focusing in niche products, niche markets where we can make a difference. And I can talk a little bit about the markets we want to focus our attention. But at the same time, we want to have enough scale to be able to compete. This 12 million tons puts us in a sweet spot in the sense of scale. It's not, okay, can we get bigger? Yeah, we can get bigger, but are we going to get better? Not necessarily. Mm-hmm. So with 12 million tons, I think we have a good weight to fight, but at the same time, we are fast enough to react to the types of volatilities that we see in the marketplace, given this what's going on in China, tariffs, and everything else. And being a family, being a family, sometimes I would say it helps because of this longer term view that we want to stay in this business. We want to continue developing this business. This is our life in the sense that we're not going to go anywhere, right? And I think sometimes it helps. And if you look some of the successful steel groups today, they are family owned, right? Some of our key competitors are families that developed their businesses through the years. So it's interesting to see that other steel companies are family controlled as well, and they're taking the same recipe, very low debt, focused in the geographies that they are currently in, and paying a lot of attention to what's coming out of China and all the confusion and tariffs that you mentioned before, yes,
right? We're going to get to that. You're right. This is a great example of how a family business brings a different strategy. But you mentioned about, niche product and so on. So I wanted to ask you, your customers these days, what do they require? And are there cases where you reached out to customer and learned something important for you? How much do you learn from your customers also?
Yes, well, I can talk, when we look at how we position our business, we are long products producer in North America, and here in Brazil, we do long products and flat roll products as well. So a complete suite of products that it's important to play in the distribution channels. So we go with power with a lot of strength into the distribution channel, providing a full suite of products. Okay. At the end of the day, our customers want us to be competitive. Okay. When you look at the Mexican market, for instance, right now we see a lot of our automotive customers, and to Toyota and Honda, we supply directly, but a lot of the other big three players, we supply through the tiers that forge and machine, and then they supply to the assembly lines, to the OEMs. Okay, they want us to be in Mexico. They want us to be close to them as possible. They want to build the value chain as close to them as possible. Why? Because they're seeing the world being more divided, the value chains being more separate, where it used to be all one, very global. Now it's more blocks. So we see customer wanting us to move closer to where they're putting their manufacturing asset base, and we have to react to that. Can we be competitive? Mexico has issues. Mexico doesn't have a lot of scrap. We are a scrap-based company. We need a lot of scrap. We are recycling in the core of our business. We recycle a lot of this metal scrap and turn into bars and products and sheet and so on. So Mexico doesn't have a lot of scrap. The scrap comes from the North American market. Power is more expensive in Mexico than in the US. So I don't have scrap. I don't have power. What do I have? Well, I have a lot of labor that I currently don't have in the US. So why don't we automate in the US? And then you have the currency fluctuation. So it's difficult. And then what products? Commodity products like rebar, or you want to be more engineered steels like special bar quality to the automotive and oil and gas type application? Because we go from a simple bar all the way to concrete strength in concrete strengths to nuclear reactors. So you see, we go a long way of different complexities of our products. So it depends a lot of what segments we want to go to. But what we want to make sure is that whenever we are playing, Gerdau is choosing to be in that sector, we are playing to win. And then that's the focus of our attention. And so far, we've been able to protect and gain market share in the markets in which you play. But sometimes it's difficult to a lot and very difficult to compete against China and compete against the Chinese government. And that plays the whole new chapter of how do we compete in the steel sector, right?
To tell you, Guilherme, you're making the steel industry sound so fascinating. I'm getting hooked up on it. So, but actually, you mentioned recycling, and I had a question here about CO2 emission, and I actually wanted to ask. I know you keep a close eye on managing and offsetting carbon emission. The steel industry does use a huge amount of energy. Do you anticipate a time when energy can be supplied renewably? How do you confront the challenge about CO2 emissions?
Yes. So in the steel industry, Francesco, you have two routes. You can go the scrap route. So you take obsolescence, you take industrial scrap, metal scrap, and you convert that, you melt that, and you roll that. So that route, the CO2 emission per ton is close to 0.4. So it's a 0.4 point, depending on the technology, between 0.2 and 0.4. Okay. And the other route, the main Chinese production infrastructure is iron ore and coking coal based.
Okay.
So that route, okay, produces 2 tons of CO2 for every ton of steel. So it's a very high intense CO2 emission on the integrated route. In Brazil, we play both, okay, because we have our own iron ore in Brazil that we are developing. So we have scrap-based and iron ore. In the US, we only play in the scrap market route. So what happens is the market today, steel in general, is responsible for 7% of overall emissions in the world. 7. Okay, if you take cement, is another 7. So the combination of those two, reinforced concrete, is close to 15%. Okay, depending on the different grades, it's close to between 13 and 16%. Okay, of overall emissions. And it's a very hard to abate sector. There's no, at scale, it's very hard. Yeah. In our case, 100 Eiffel Towers per month. Okay, how are we going to do that? It's very difficult. So what's happening right now in Europe, especially, okay, hydrogen, the hydrogen technology, hydrogen route of reducing oxygen out of iron ore is gaining traction. At scale, not at scale yet, but the whole industry is paying tremendous attention to that, okay, and playing where we can play. So where can we source energy from the renewable sources? So now, all right, we are intense energy player in Brazil. Okay, so we're gonna go solar, we're gonna go wind, and then we're gonna go hydro. Okay, so all energy, all power coming into our plants is gonna be renewable, 100%. So we're doing that. Okay, so we're moving into playing the levers of value that we can make a difference. But at the core technology of producing steel, it's very hard to abate at scale at the moment. But it's gonna move. All right, it's gonna move because it's some customers want a zero emission steel, especially in the automotive market. They want lighter steels and they want zero emission steels, which is good for us because it's going to be very difficult to produce. But we have the technology. So sometimes the market pushes you into a difficult corner, but you would like to be in that difficult corner because your competitors are going to have a harder time to play in that space, even because they don't have the capital to allocate and develop those markets, or because they don't have the scale to play in those markets. So it's a moving dynamic. It's very dynamic right now, but at the same time, a hard to abate sector.
That's fascinating. And, Guilherme, I'm getting flooded with questions because it's clearly you're stimulating a lot of curiosity. There's several questions here about tariffs, of course, is coming. So let me ask you a more general question in general, right? What are you watching for in terms of trade policies right now? What are the implications for the steel industry, for Gerdau? What are you?
Yes. Steel has always been very much in the center of all the tariff discussion, tariff and quota, for that matter, discussion, right? Trump, in his first term, put in place Section 232, selecting the steel industry and steel and aluminum, as strategic sectors for national defense. Okay, so he played that card, and that had a tremendous effect everywhere. So, does the steel industry supply to military and defense sector? The answer is yes. Okay, is that a critical sector to the steel industry? I said no, small, very small. But the Trump administration at the time said this is national security and we want to have the steel industry very competitive. We are going to avoid having Chinese steel, for instance, Chinese steel coming into the US market, and that had effects on Turkey, that had effects on Europe, that had effects on us, Brazilian players exporting into the US. So the Trump administration, his first term, was very aggressive on tariffs, but that had an interesting effect. The first effect is that prices moved up significantly at the time. We had spreads of $400, maybe $350 when tariffs came into place. Spreads went to $800 to almost $1,000 per ton, so more than doubled. But the market quickly started reacting and adjusting that down. All right, that was one point. The second point is that the steel industry, given these tariffs and quotas implemented by the U.S. government, reinvested a lot of money. So the capital projects that they had in place were to maintain, but once the tariffs were put in place and Section 232 was implemented, they doubled that down. We doubled down our capex into the US and Canadian market, especially in the US market. A lot of our competitors went even further, investing in capacity, improving productivity, modernizing the plants, gaining access to technology that they didn't have in the past. So there was a reaction of the steel industry that was positive to the sustainability of the business. We can argue if it's for national defense, yes or no, but that's up to the government to decide. But the fact of the matter is, the reaction of the steel industry was large and was significant. Section 232 implemented 25% tariff in general, and some other markets remain very open. Not all markets reacted the same way, right? Europe followed. Mexico, which is a country that has trade agreements with almost everyone, reacted as well with 25%. Brazil is open. Brazil is 11% tariff. So everyone is flooding. So everyone now is flooding our market here in Brazil. We used to have 11, 12% import penetration. Now we're close to 30. So a reaction probably is going to come from this market as well. So you see that the dynamics of this, you implement tariff in one market, it impacts the other. And so right now, I think what we want to do is make sure we promote fair trade in the different associations that we are part of. It's not just a matter of being a protectionist standpoint, but it's about being leveling the playing field as on a fair trade dynamic. We can't compete with everyone, especially in the US and in Brazil, but we cannot compete against governments. So subsidized products need to find the reaction that is appropriate. And then tariffs is one way of doing it. Countervailing duties is another way of doing it. Quotas is another way of doing. Hard quotas is even another way of implementing commercial defense. So there's a suite of multiple alternatives that the industry has found to react against unfair competition.
That's so interesting and fascinating. But I have to see, 1 hour looked long, but time is flying, and I still have so many questions here. Let me, there's so many questions about the industry, the world is. Let me ask one more general question, because I also want at the end ask you one question at least about Kellogg. But so right now, right, what do you see today in terms of post-pandemic industrial policy, infrastructure spending in North America? Where do you see us going?
Well, in the US, and I was talking to customers earlier this year, and I'm going to be doing another round with customers this coming month, because I see the best way of learning things is to staying close to your customer. I see them as prioritizing growth, okay, and being able to allocate capital, being ready. I hear a lot about deregulation. Okay, I hear a lot about that. What does that mean to our business? Because if oil and gas comes up, it's highly intensive in steel. So we're gonna watch very closely what's coming out of the regulation and what are the opportunities we have there. And then I see also lower taxation. So with this new administration, especially in the US, I see a focus on what's coming out of growth, what's the regulation and lower taxation. Okay, now the infrastructure bill is necessary. The US infrastructure is outdated, is been crippling its gain in productivity. If you look at what happened in Korea, and if you look at what happened in China, infrastructure was the main enabler of gain, of improvement in productivity. So we need to, especially here in Brazil and in the Americas in general, the only way, one of the key ways to improve productivity is going to be to revamp our infrastructure. So, and this infrastructure revamp that I say, the infrastructure bill that was sitting sort of in the sidelines, waiting for the definition of what's coming out of the elections, what are the new policies that are coming in place, and this is coming strong now. I see this as the main opportunity to improve on productivity, Francesca, is to invest in infrastructure, and that's the water treatment systems, highways, bridges, infrastructure, transportation infrastructure in the US that is outdated. So I see a lot of opportunities there, and I also see funding being allocated to those projects, and this is going to benefit productivity in a very significant way. So we are optimistic with that. Are you seeing the order book? Well, we saw a little bit of the order book last year, but I think it's going to pick up now in this, probably in the second half of this year, not as much in the first half. We are seeing now things becoming a lot slower in the US in the second half of last year, because the higher cost of capital, interest rates really played an important role in slowing things down. We took the medicine, and it's sort of like the effect took us a couple of quarters to take place, but now it's there. So higher costs of capital are preventing new launches, but I think it's going to adjust itself as we move forward.
Okay, let me ask one question about Kellogg, right? I know you have, and every time I came to Brazil, you helped me organize amazing events, and we saw there's so many passionate Brazilian alums, and in general, the network. Can you tell us about how your time at Kellogg informed your vision about the family business? Or also, how it helped you to create a net? How do you stay plugged in the Kellogg network?
Well,
I know you're coming to 25 years reunion.
Yes. Well, I'm looking
year.
forward for that. Seeing again great friends, lifetime friends that I made 25 years ago, right, Francesca? I actually don't count 25. I need to count 27 because I came in 98. Right?
You're right, but we count from the graduation years.
Yeah, but you're counting net, but I count gross. Okay.
Yeah, well done. You're right.
and then I think some things when I came in, we looking from a distance, right? Maybe 27 years or 28 years ago, we looked, okay, Kellogg's inviting international students. It's open to international students. It's reinventing the business education. Dean Jacobs had this vision. Absolutely. And we looked at Dean Jacobs. Oh, this is a visionary that is developing the graduate education and reinventing a lot of things. And so that attracted me in a significant way. And one other topic that a lot of schools claim as well, but Kellogg not only claims, but Kellogg actually is teamwork oriented. And I think right, Francesca, a lot of our competition, they claim it that they are, but we are in our DNA, okay, yes. A teamwork oriented culture. And at Kellogg, not only a team oriented, but also the quality of the team members that you had. Somebody from Korea, somebody from North America, somebody from Latin America, somebody from India. You had only bright individuals around you. So that really changed my perspective on building teams and executing with different teams. So I think I learned a lot about on aspects of teamwork as well as collaboration, right? These are very competent individuals that can collaborate between themselves. So I remember, Francesca, a trip we did to Russia. Okay. The way back then, it was called GIM, Global Issues in Management.
We still have Jim.
You still have it, right?
Yes.
Actually, I want to host. I actually want to host, Sharmila. If the team comes to Brazil, I want to host.
Yes. I will check. Yes.
Yeah, let me know. If they want to come to Brazil, they should come to Brazil.
They should come to Brazil.
It's a great country. They should come visit here, São Paulo, Rio. I remember doing a team oil and gas project in which we even interacted with Gorbachev. So the breadth and of knowledge and of the Kellogg brand, awareness of the Kellogg brand across the globe is fantastic. And you're doing a fantastic job promoting that and continuing that, reinventing that as well, Francesca. So congratulations for you as well on your work on developing Kellogg even further around the world.
Well, thank you, Guilherme. But really, I couldn't do it without alums like you, like all alums, right? That's why we want to reinvent business education, but we talk about the full circle because we need alums to come. And you've been such an amazing example of why Kellogg alums are amazing and why they can make a difference in what we teach, in the content, in the network. I mean, in 1 hour, I feel like now I have a new vision of the steel industry. I'm gonna start following it. So, and I apologize to all the people whose question I didn't pick up. There were so many questions, Guilherme. Also, some of your ex-classmates. I'll send you all the question I didn't pick up. I'll tell you all the interventions later so you can see. But thank you, everybody. This was such a great example of what an amazing community we have. So much knowledge, so much impact we can have. Thank you for your engagement with Kellogg. Thank you for everything you're doing. And I look forward to keep moving, observing the steel industry, and keep moving at Kellogg with alums like you. Thank you so much, Guilherme. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Francesca. Thank you, guys. Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.